Hey, welcome to episode number 2 of Three Guys in a Bible. I'm Chris.
I'm David.
And I'm Ken.
And so we're back with you again. Excited to be here. We all survived the eclipse, so obviously if you're listening, you did as well. I read some articles that many of you have eye damage, though, because you didn't wear the awesome glasses that you were supposed to wear.
The black glasses?
The black glasses they were. Yeah, I can't see a thing. It's amazing how that even works. It was cool. I mean, our country, everybody went crazy, but it was neat. Hopefully you got a chance to see that, because you won't get to again. My youngest was that way. She was like, yeah, okay, it'll kind of be neat. They'd studied it, in school. She's a 5th grader, and she was off doing her own thing. We're like, okay, it's about ready to happen. Oh, it is? So she came out, and then she was hooked. She's like, whoa, that's so neat how it was.
It's way cooler in seeing it than talking about it.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. You are correct. All right, so here's what we're doing this week. Sometimes we're going to talk about possibly what our church is talking about on that Sunday, just kind of a follow-up. We know that a lot of people that will be listening aren't from Berea Christian Church, and so that's cool. So if we do that, when we do that, we'll always give you just a little bit of insight as to where we're coming from, so you kind of know our starting point. But we won't always. I think probably we might already have our next topic lined up, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about on a Sunday morning at all. So just to let you know, that's kind of the direction. This last Sunday, we talked about rest, in particular the Sabbath. And the whole premise of the message on Sunday morning was about a verse in chapter 2 of Mark, where Jesus and his disciples find themselves being confronted by the Pharisees because they were hungry and they picked some grain in a field on the Sabbath. And they confronted Jesus with, why are your disciples doing what's not allowed or not permitted on the Sabbath? And Jesus' response to them was this: the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. That is the passage that this was all based on. So the topic for today is just about rest in our life and observing the Sabbath in our modern world in which we live. And so that is where we will begin, gentlemen. Go right ahead.
Yeah, our small group, we talked about the fact that America really doesn't know what rest is. And I found that to be true. I mean, every job I've had, I had to work overtime and hours to not just make ends meet, but just to do extra things with the family. And it's hard to find rest.
I think in my life, when I think of the Sabbath and rest and peace, is probably different than what a lot of people think, because I find it very relaxing, and I actually enjoy cutting grass. I know that that's not on the top of everyone's list when they think, I'm going to rest today, so I'm going to go home and cut my lawn. But it's very therapeutic, and I do just want to say, I find it very relaxing on a riding lawnmower.
Yes, has to be.
Not a push mower, not even a self-propelled lawnmower where I have to walk behind it. I find it very relaxing just to get out and cut grass. There's nothing for me to think about. I just go back and forth. And it's very relaxing for me. Cleaning the house, I don't have a problem with that on my day off, because it's getting everything in order, and that brings me peace, and that brings me rest. And so that's probably different than what a lot of people might say. But there are also those days where I just literally do nothing. I just sit.
I know this has probably come to a big surprise to a lot of people that are listening, if you know me at all. I have a difficult time just sitting and doing absolutely nothing. Shocking, I know, but it's true. I really do. Not that I have to be doing something, but I can always think of something. Oh, I could go do this. Especially if there's no one home. One of your favorite things, Ken, is when nobody's home, hey, I can just kick back. When nobody's home, I'm like, hey, I can do this and this and this and this and this, because I won't miss time with those people when they're home, because I'm off doing this, and this. And so that's a hard thing for me. There are a couple of vacations that we will take that I do rest. Well, I literally do just sit and stare at the ocean or people or whatever and eat food. I find eating food very restful. I don't know anybody else is.
Nothing else
The whole
is
thing about going
enjoyable.
on vacation is finding a new place to eat.
Find a new places to eat. But I do. And so for me, it's a little different, my forms of rest and my Sabbath. One of the things that we discussed was where the Sabbath originated. A lot of people think it originated with the commandment, the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. But that is not where it originated. It originated all the way back in Genesis chapter 2, when God, after all of creation was done, rested from his work. His work was complete. He wasn't tired like we are. His work was complete, and he set an example for all men. It said he set apart the Sabbath. He made it holy. He blessed that day, and he made it a part of our schedule. And that's what Jesus is referring to in Mark, is that we have to observe this. We have to obey God in this. He gave us this Sabbath as a gift. He knows we need the rest. On 6 days we shall work, not the 5-day work week or the 3-day work week or whatever. On 6 days we shall work. On the 7th we shall rest and worship. And what I wanted to bring up was our group that meets on Monday nights. Someone within our group had just a brilliant way of thinking of this, and I want to talk about how maybe we can change our culture, our church culture, our thinking on the Sabbath to conform to this. We Americans spend our Sabbath preparing for the week ahead. The Jewish culture uses the week to prepare for the Sabbath. Everything on the Jewish calendar gets them ready so that they can observe the Sabbath. In other words, they put work into getting ready for that rest, for that worship, so they can set everything aside. Their culture shuts down for the Sabbath. As we know, our culture around us does not, but our individual, personal culture, family, whatever, could, if we prepared like they do. So what do you guys think of that concept? How do we flip that in our culture so that we spend our week preparing for this gift coming from God, the Sabbath, instead of what we currently do, which is we try to make it to the Sabbath so we can prepare for the week ahead?
I feel like, as a full-time pastor, I really feel like I start my week off on Sunday, and that propels me through the week. And then I have my Friday that I use as my Sabbath. And so, because I do plan ahead, everything is ready, and I'm not worried about going to work on the next day. And I know that that's different for other vocations, because I've been in those, and I know it is different for that. But I really feel that I do partake in the Sabbath and have it as a day of rest.
How can we, I mean, everybody listening today, they don't think of their week as preparing for this rest, for this Sabbath. But everybody's just trying to get through to the weekend, and that's if they don't work weekends, right? So how can we share with them? How can we encourage them? How can we help them understand the importance of what this gift is from God, why it's essential to our being as humans, and help them learn how to prepare? I know, me personally, I still view my Sunday as my Sabbath. Do I work on a Sunday? I've had that conversation with people many times. I don't think I do.
Yeah.
What I do on a Sunday would be identical. The only difference is I'm up front, in front of people for 35, 40 minutes on a Sunday. Everything else I do on a Sunday is the exact same as it would be if I wasn't up front in front of people for 35 or 40 minutes on a Sunday. So
Yeah, I mean, we all would be serving regardless, and to serve is worship. So
yeah,
if I wasn't leading worship, I'd still be serving somewhere in that facet.
you'd be in the band.
Yeah,
For sure.
Playing guitar, yeah.
Absolutely. It's a psychological shift. It's a change of mind, that renewed mind that we try to get people to have, that conformed mind to the mind of Christ, of looking at our weeks differently. Monday begins the preparation for our next meeting, encounter with God on the Sabbath, and family and worship and rest even. I love mowing as well, and I love mowing on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, when the family isn't home yet, and I get it done. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I don't mow, I don't trim, I don't do that kind of work. I rest or do things I want to do other than mow. You know, how do we do that? How can we help those with the 9 to 5 or the 10-hour or even 12-hour shifts? You know, that are out there working. How can we help them observe this rhythm in their life? How do we encourage them in that?
So as we're looking at it, I think most people have Sunday, or they would consider Sunday to be their Sabbath. And so, you know, there's always stuff to do around the house if you're a homeowner or even a renter, I guess. There's always stuff to do, whether it be laundry or dishes or cutting the grass or whatever it might be. And so if we're disciplined and we get that done either in the evenings, Monday through Friday, or on Saturday, then that does leave our Sunday as our Sabbath, that we can have a day of rest, that we can not have to worry about doing housework or chores or whatever you want to call them. And so as we do that, you know, it can come with great anticipation that, hey, I know it's kind of hectic right now, but on Sunday I'll be able to get up a little bit later than normal. I'll be able to go and attend worship, you know, with my family. And then I've got the rest of the day to spend with them. And unfortunately, we look past so many of the things in life that are basically free because we can walk in the park and just enjoy God's creation. We can just go home and take a nap. What better form of rest than that?
Yeah.
Or we could just spend time visiting with family, put down all the electronics, and just spend time visiting.
Yep, and that Sabbath rest is different than just rest because it does involve worship. It does involve those aspects as well, that change of mentality. Something I didn't grasp, you know, even learning the Ten Commandments as a kid and things like that God set the Sabbath apart, and that's what we have to do. We have to set it apart in our schedule. It's got to be separated from everything else. That's what God requires of us. It can't be blended and merged with everything else. It has to be, God made it holy and set it apart for man. That's what Jesus tells us. In Hebrews chapter 4, so a lot of people view the Sabbath, well, that's Old Testament. That's the Ten Commandments. Jesus, we don't have to do those things. No, that's not true at all. And in the New Testament book of Hebrews, it specifically addresses this idea. In chapter 4, verse 9, it says, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God." That's us. "For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter into that rest, so that no one will perish by following the example of disobedience." So if we're not observing the Sabbath, then we are being disobedient to God and what he knows is best for our lives. We can make all the excuses in the world. Well, I've got this, I've got that. Well, who scheduled this? Who scheduled that? You know, aside from your work telling you have to come in, you know, on that day, that might be out of your power. But everything else we do and choose not to have a Sabbath is our choice. We're being disobedient to God. And that, I love the middle of that, makes every effort. It's work. It's not, it doesn't just happen. Even 2,000 years ago, it didn't just happen. People had to make an effort to enter into that Sabbath rest.
So here's the question. How far do we want to take that obedience? Okay, we've talked about the Sabbath and making it a day of rest. All right, so I'm going to put that to work in my life. We want our congregation. We would love to see our congregation put that to work in their life. Everyone that's listening to our podcast, we would love it for you to, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. But here comes the question, how far do we push that? Because after church, I like to go out to lunch. Well, somebody has to be at the restaurant to cook that food and take my order and make sure everything is ready. So I really want people to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, but not the people at the restaurant I go to. They need to be at work, right?
Do they?
Hmm.
We need
Now,
to invite them in to our Sabbath. with us.
I'm a little bit older than the other two guys, and I remember when most of the town was shut down on Sundays. Sundays and Wednesday nights were holy times. The schools didn't schedule stuff. Most businesses were closed. But now,
a lot of local places in small towns still kind of follow that with Sunday and Monday down in Sullivan, and sometimes in Brazil too. I mean,
sure.
they don't open on Sunday and Monday. Let the people have rest.
And so if we truly believe what
Yep.
we're saying, that's what needs to happen. We need to make sure that everything is prepared ahead of time, because it's not fair. If we're truly going back to the Sabbath where no work is to be done and it to be a day of rest, then cooking.
It says your male and female servants,
Yeah.
even, in the Ten Commandments. So absolutely, it could pertain that way. It's an interesting thing to ponder. I know, in our world, occasionally we'll go out to dinner on a Sunday, but usually Sundays are for leftovers at our house. We do well of cooking meals throughout the week, and so we
Yeah.
go home and have the smorgasbord. We set
There
it
you
all
go.
out and say, fix your plate, eat what you want. So we don't invite a whole lot of people over on Sundays unless they want to eat leftovers. Most people don't want to do that, Ken. I don't know why. My wife's cooking's very good, so her leftovers are usually pretty good too. But yeah, definitely an interesting theme to consider. And if you do decide to do that, how do you help those that you're interacting with enter into what you're doing? That's a good thing. Definitely need to at very least break the stereotype that Christians are the worst customers at restaurants, worst tippers.
Worst tippers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and everything else. That's ridiculous, is what that is.
It's shameful.
It is.
Yeah.
You're willing to pay, $12 for your silly cheeseburger meal at fill in the blank restaurant, and you won't leave at least a few dollar tip. I mean, yeah, that's craziness, for sure. So, what else? Anything else to cover in that world? Got one little thing to end with, but it's a big deal. We went through all the ideas of how important rest is for our lives, for our body, for our physical health, for our mental health. It's essential.
Yeah, I think that rest just looks different for everybody. I had lunch with a friend last Friday, and him and his group of friends all participate in the Sabbath, and I really hadn't put a lot of thought into it until recently. But he said just spending time with his family is rest to him, and I can attest to that as well. And that would be my rest.
Absolutely. It is. It brings you joy to get to do that. The last thing I'll throw in then is I got an article shortly before this message came up, and the title of the article was "Sabbath Isn't Just Rest, It's Rebellion." We are rebelling against the culture if we make this a priority, if we set it aside. Every element of our lives are about getting as much done as we can, whenever we can, being as productive as we can. And when we set aside a time that says, no, I'm not going to be productive. I'm not going to get anything done. I'm going to rest. I'm going to just worship. I'm not going to play the world's game for that time. We're rebelling against the standards of the world, and that will cause some to look at us in a bad manner until they get to realize what it is we're doing and how important it is to us, and then the benefit of it. And it's a blessing. There's a reward when we honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. So embrace that reward, folks. Go for it. Send us messages. How are you observing the Sabbath in your life? Maybe this makes you think about it a little differently. How can you change things in your family structure, your family culture, to make this a priority? It is a blessing from God. It's an act of obedience. As we'll talk about in a few weeks, obedience is absolutely essential to our faith. There's no way around it. And in this act of obedience, there's a blessing waiting for us when we remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. So, hey, we want to thank you for joining us, whatever version, wherever you're at, whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. We thank you for that. Please, please, please like this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, share it with others on social media. Just help us get this word out. We want to grow this as fast as we can to be able to share with as many people as we can, because after all, we are just three guys in the Bible. We're nobody special, just folks that God called, and we all decide to answer in our own unique ways. We're not perfect in any way. We don't have all the answers at all. We're a lot like all of you, and just thank you for giving us the chance to share this with you.
Until next time, I'm Ken.
I'm Dave.
I'm Chris.
We're three guys in the Bible.